So I want to start off with one of our healthcare customers, Cerner. Cerner is a healthcare provider, a wide range of data and services, and they serve hospitals, pharmacies, and healthcare providers globally. Allison and Sridhar were both a part of that deployment. And so I'm really excited that we can hear straight from the horse's mouth how that went. Ultimately, they selected Optane for caching diagnostic images at the edge and scaling their infrastructure services globally. So thanks for joining us today, Allison and Sridhar. So Allison, I'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about the Cerner projects, why they considered Optane-based solutions for their data center.
Yeah, maybe I'll start by just saying that working with Cerner was one of those things that's personally fulfilling, because when you and your team get to work with a partner like Cerner that's integrating Optane technology, not just to support like these mission critical operations, but I think of a lot of the work, and when I talk about these workloads, it's like life critical operations. You want your healthcare professional to have the data they need, the moment that they need it, to give you that high quality care that you want for your friends and your family and your coworkers. And so that's a lot of what the solution is about, is doing these edge deployments so you can get this timely care and you can get that data. So for this one, you can think about just the number of operations that a hospital does in any given day, any given week. They're storing and accessing data. There's lots of different kinds of data and accesses going on. So you have clinicians that are writing notes, you have medical records that are getting read and accessed, updated, you have device information, and you have a lot of images. And these images and these videos, they're high quality. You're looking at them to do diagnostics. Sometimes you're having multiple people accessing them, very closely in proximity, or different physical locations, but right one after another, as you're trying to just take care of that patient. And each of those accesses, you really want whoever is doing that access to feel like the data is right there in a box next to them. So for this engagement with Cerner, in this particular case, Cerner had already moved off their legacy storage area network to a vSAN deployment that could better scale and evolve with their business. And so we were really coming in as a partner to see how we can make the solution even better. And part of that making it better was getting a solution that was cost optimized, cost effective. Where do you spend the money to get the most value out of it? And with the diversity of workloads that are running on vSAN in this usage model, using Optane as a caching tier was really the best solution to get that cost and performance optimization. So as a cache, you're really hitting on where Optane shine, because you're getting high throughput, low latencies, and you're counting on the reliability of that high endurance. So you have lots of VMs that are running different workloads, different data sets, periodic bursts of I/O, and Optane has to keep up with that throughput and reliably respond with latency. The nice thing about the particular vSAN architecture with this caching tier is that you don't need a large SSD for this. We were able to do so with our 375 gigabyte Optane SSD, and utilize that great throughput that it has at that small size and the high endurance. The cache tier example is also a good one for where you're paying. You're paying for your I/O and paying for where that matters more than you're paying for capacity. Because you have a separate capacity tier, right? You can put your slower storage there, and you can really, get lots of gigabytes for the money. But you want that comfort and ease of mind that as you have lots of VMs and maybe bursts of I/O going to the system, and accessing the same hardware, that you have that consistently great performance that you can count on in these life critical situations.
Thanks for sharing that. And do you know, when they were looking at the Optane drive, what were they comparing it to? I mean, were they looking at just fast NAND? Were they looking at competitors?
Yeah, they were looking both at our NAND as another option to that, as well as our competitors' NAND drives as options for that caching tier.
Okay, great. And what do you recall what level of performance improvement or delta that they saw?
Yeah, so I would say that it is a little workload dependent, and depending on that, we're seeing anywhere from so if I'm just comparing, we'll say a NAND caching device, NAND TLC caching device to this Optane, you're going to see anywhere from like a 20% better to even a 2x better. It just depends on the amount of workload. one of the great things, especially as an edge deployment with these mission critical, is that Optane performs best in those heavy workloads. And especially when you can't predict, right? You're thinking about like, I need it to be really reliable because I don't know when I'm going to have just like a rush of I/O going to those devices. That's really where it shines, because the more pressure, write and read pressure you're putting on those Optane, the better performance that you get out of it in compared to a NAND device.
So these edge systems are just like X-ray viewers or MRI viewers that are sitting on a doctor's or clinician's desks, so I can look at these things that are being produced someplace else, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you're capturing those images, and they're all going to this edge server that's holding them, and then they're being accessed. Whether to be you've got an expert doing the diagnosis, you've got maybe a clinician in the room who's just adding notes to it, right? From all different areas of the hospital. And so they're accessing off of that edge vSAN deployment.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
And Sridhar, my understanding is they also deployed persistent memory. Tell us a little bit about what they were doing there. And was it for memory expansion, I think you said?
Yes,
Okay.
Thanks, Kristie. As you have stated before, for most of our PMEM deployments, we do POCs, or we do a very like a close engagement with our customers to make sure they get the best experience. That's what we have done with this customer. We have worked with them for almost the last whole year, and even this year. Like yesterday, also I was working with them. I was like, we normally spend time to look at different clusters in their vSphere environment across the board, because they have a lot of internal, external customer workloads, and they have a lot of other customers using for different purposes with variable workloads. So that's why we have done a deep dive analysis at each cluster, thousands of systems, to make sure they are all a perfect fit for PMEM and they can get the best performance what they are looking for. And based on that, we have analyzed, and we have found was anywhere they have even got like 2x type of consolidation, and also they have seen in some cases even performance improvement, because they were having some memory swap happening to the disk, and we did those analysis. At the same time, we also analyzed to make sure we are not just bumping up the memory, but also network, storage, and CPU. So we have done across the board the 4 pillars to make sure they are really balanced. And one of the main objective they met was in the VM consolidation, and having a consistent platform across the board, so that they don't have different CPUs with different memory and different storage, so that they need to manage differently. Instead, they had a more homogeneous landscape with a PMEM, and they were able to spread the workloads across the board, and they have seen really great results without any performance degradation with PMEM, and they saved a good amount of money also.
Yeah. So how did you talk more about the balancing of the 4 pillars? How did you help them determine the ratio of persistent memory to DRAM versus storage?
Yep, that's a good question. We have been looking, and normally in vSphere, in the vCenter, they capture a metric called active memory. That is one of the metric that gives us an indication of which memory is getting like actively changed or read from, and we have made sure that the active memory always fits in DRAM, and we have looked across the board, and we made sure we have even oversized DRAM, so that even if they have some burst during a quarter or a month end or different periods of the time during COVID times, they could have a spike, right? So when they have those spikes, we can take it. So we have sized them enough, and currently their all deployments are like 1:4 ratios, and we have oversized the caching, but still better to be safe. And we have learned jointly together, and they're having really good experience on that.
Okay, and this question really can be for either of you, but my understanding is that Cerner actually supports hospitals worldwide. I mean, this is a technology and a service that extends globally, lots of different endpoints and users. Were there any unique challenges or concerns that you guys were having to monitor and watch as you helped them develop their solutions?
I think, as I told, and they have I don't know if I'm supposed to talk, so I'm not going to give the information, but I'll tell they have different regulatory requirements for different things. And also they have from a current architecture, they were having different sizing systems, like some has a lower capacity memory or CPUs and network and storage. So that's where we had to spend good amount of time to look at different workloads, from databases to web workloads to internal workloads to all of them, to make sure we are compliant with the requirements that they have. Like, say, one of the thing I can say is like a spectrum meltdown, right? Like, one of that thing was a critical thing, and we have to get back to that customer telling, no, we have fixed that issue in cascade, like at hardware level. And also that unlocks some of the potential, because they have in some cases, a lot of customers, not just Cerner, have disabled hyperthreading. So those type of things, challenges we have encountered during this implementation, and we have given the enough documentation to tell what type of things we have addressed, what of them things are still open, so that they are completely aware of those things and make the right calls. And that's what we have done.
Can you give some idea of the VM density allowed by the Optane PMEM versus the other solutions that they were looking at?
Yeah, in some cases where we haven't seen, like, say, I have seen 3-4 different scenarios. I'll give you some of those scenarios. Like, one scenario is where their CPU utilization was very low. And their memory allocation or consumption was high. So what we have done is we have showed them by adding more memory with persistent memory at lower cost, we were able to almost in some cases double their number of density. I would say 2x. They were close to almost getting to, I don't know if I'm supposed to give you exact numbers, but I would say somewhere they have gone, say, I'm just giving you example, like, say, if they had a 20 VMs on a host, they were able to get to 40 VMs, or they were on a 30 or 40 VMs, they were able to get to 80 VMs. So something like that we have done in some of those cases. In some cases, they were already on the higher capacity, but there were some things that they can tweak. So we have given them some recommendation. I call that one as a displacement, means we are replacing a 1 terabyte or a 1.5 terabyte DRAM with a PMEM solution. Then we tell them this is what you have to do to get the best performance from that platform. And then we have seen some cases where they were bottlenecked on the CPU, or they are mission critical, and they have a different variability in performance during different days of the week. Then we have recommended some of them to stay with the DRAM solutions, but they were very small percentages of them. But we have seen in some cases they have CPU was a bottleneck, so we have taken them to like a cascade like refresh CPUs, so that they get the more frequency and more core count, so that they can address some of those. So we have done a deep analysis to get ready wait state and different things to make sure they are not bottlenecked on the CPU to memory.
Did you build any let's say reference architecture in the end, so that everything is replicable, or is it an ongoing work and you are changing configuration and tuning and everything every time you apply, you deploy these devices in the field?
So for at least for this customer like Cerner, we have done that type of reference architecture in the beginning. We have provided them the high-end configuration initially, like a few systems, so that they can set up the clusters, and they have tested the workload to see it meets their needs, and do we need to do some optimizations. But once we have looked at their tens of clusters, then we have came up with one reference architecture that is applicable across the board for their cluster, for their whole data center, and that's what they have been deploying, and they have been rolling out from last year, and even this year they're rolling out all the workloads and across the data center with persistent memory. But for other customers also, we have worked and put some reference architectures together. But as I told in the beginning, this is not a DRAM, right? PMEM is not DRAM. that we have to be clear. So for some workloads, it may not be a good fit. What we are trying to do is we have published some of the papers, some of the articles to help customers how to size them, how to identify whether they are good fit or not. But we have great success because we have been doing that hand-holding, not only with the customer, but we are bringing in our OEM partners, like say in this case, HPE was very closely collaborating with us. And also we pulled in VMware as needed basis, right? So that we were all jointly together putting a reference architecture in the best interest of our customers.
Do you mean that a POC is practically necessary in large installation anyway, or do you have enough knowledge now after a couple of years?
That's a good question, right? Initially, when we started in 2019, that's where our concern was, as Kristie was stating before, POCs was a must in 2019 and even in 2020 beginning. But after tens of deployments with customers, and we are doing more than 50 to 100 POCs with other customers, we have learned a lot. Not just Intel, our partners like HPE, our VMware has learned a lot, and now we are almost at a stage where I could say I have few customers already in production that they did not do POCs because we found the right way to analyze the telemetry data, and we can educate the customer why is it a good fit and how they can get the best performance. And also you can think this way, right? How people have been used to in the storage world, like a tiering, like a caching tier and a capacity tier. Similarly, you can assume in memory segment also, there is a caching tier and capacity tier. Caching tier will be DRAM always, and capacity tier will be always PMEM. And that's where we are educating our partners and customers to show them is how to size them properly so that they can get the best performance. In some cases, it could be customer comes back and tells, no, my objective is like a lab or a test system. I want to save as much as I can so that I can accommodate more VMs. That could be some situations, and some situations where customers tell, no, I can't sacrifice any performance. I want exactly same performance I get with DRAM. Then that's what we have learned, and that's what we have even working with some tools like say Dell and Live Optics and a couple of other tools that we have where we are embedding those things so that we can guide our pre-sales teams, our partners and our customers. And that's where we are.
Let me jump in here too and say, what came out of this Cerner thing and some of the other work we've done with VMware is we now have pre-configured SKUs and configs based out of those learnings that like if you do a 4-to-1 now, VMware automatically certifies because it covers the breadth of a lot of workloads out there. And then each customer has to decide if they want to optimize further.
Yeah, I think based on our learnings, we have picked those configs, right? And that is like you can think of like a conservative configuration so that we cover 90-95% of our customers, but the customers could go with other configurations also.
Basically, at the end of the day, what was Cerner's experience, and what do you think ultimately led them to take the leap of faith and trust Optane as a new technology in their environment?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, I mean, really, I think that, and maybe my commentary on the last question was that there is a balance, even with the Optane SSDs, there is a balance between making sure that we have the right core count and core frequency and networking card matched with the Optane. Those four pillars do kind of relate to each other, and to pack the most of VM density in, and then to get the best performance out of the drives that you have. And so I think that luckily the recipe for our SSDs is not as complex as the recipe for the persistent memory. And so having those ready nodes available and having our OEM partners in place, it's pretty easy to go and select a configuration where we've got that balance in. And then it's a matter of just helping hit the easy button really on our Cerner side and get those workloads in and deploy that for them. So and that way they're really happy with what they saw. And in many ways, we exceeded their expectations with the performance that our Optane cache was able to do.
Add to it, right? I think Cerner is very happy with their deployments. As I told in the beginning of my conversation, like they are even like yesterday night, I was working on some of those their help they were asking for. They normally try to validate with us to make sure whenever they are moving the new clusters to the premium systems, they just want to make sure they have this balance in the whole cluster, and those type of things. They are still working with us, even though we have we have already sold the systems to the customer. We are not leaving the customer. We are making sure they are happy, but at least I can say they are very confident and they're very comfortable with the technologies. That's why they have bought bulk load of premium and Optane SSDs. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both for sharing your story, because this is the fun part. This is where the rubber hits the road, and it's always great to hear about the successful deployments.